Before I tell you what happened in that courtroom, I need you to understand something about me. My name is Owen Joseph, and I am not the kind of man who makes for an interesting story. I fix things, I show up on time, I remember anniversaries, and I leave notes on the refrigerator, and I have never, not once in my 38 years on this earth, walked into a room and made anyone turn their head. My father used to say that the Joseph men were built for loyalty, not for legend. I believed him, I lived by it. And for a long time, I thought that was enough. It wasn't enough. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Well, this is going to be a good story from Owen Joseph. Let's dive in. The suit was my father's. I remember that now, sitting here turning it over in my hands before I go in, the slight pulling at the shoulders, the buttons that are just one generation out of style. I'd had it dry cleaned the week before, as if that would matter, as if the judge would look at the seams and decide something. I was already doing that thing I always do when I'm scared, which is focusing on the wrong details. The suit, the folder. Whether I'd printed enough copies of the documents I barely understood. I walked into that courtroom alone. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I need you to understand what alone felt like that morning. It wasn't just that I had no lawyer, it was that I had no one sitting behind me in that gallery, no hand on my shoulder before I pushed through the door, no voice in my ear saying, "You've got this." My father had been dead for 3 years. My mother had passed the year before that, and my brother. But I'll get to my brother. That's its own wound, and it deserves its own telling. I set my folder on the defendant's table and sat down. The folder had edges that weren't lined up. I fixed them again. Emilia came in 7 minutes later. I heard her before I saw her. The click of heels that were more expensive than anything she'd owned when we got married. The low murmur of her lawyer's voice beside her, steady and assured. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes on my folder. But I heard the moment she stopped walking, and I heard the quiet that followed, and I knew she was looking at me. Looking at the empty chair beside me, the chair where a lawyer should have been sitting. Then I heard it. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel, not in the way that would make a scene. It was soft, almost private, the kind of laugh that happens when something is exactly as ridiculous as you'd expected. Her shoulders moved. I saw it from the corner of my eye. Her lawyer, Victor Price, wrote something on his notepad. The judge entered. All rise. I stood up. My father's suit pulled at my shoulders. And somewhere in the back of my mind, so quiet I almost missed it, something that felt less like a thought and more like a memory of a feeling said, "Hold on. Please, before I continue, kindly support this channel by subscribing, like, sharing, and commenting. Let's move on." I should tell you about the voicemail before I tell you what happened when they played it, because hearing your own voice broken open in front of strangers is a specific kind of humiliation that I want you to understand fully. It was a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks before the first court date. I was sitting in the kitchen of a house that still smelled like her, that particular combination of her shampoo and the vanilla candles she kept on the windowsill, and I had been sitting there for approximately 4 hours doing nothing. Just sitting. The way you do when your body hasn't yet communicated to your brain that the thing you're waiting for is not coming. I called her at 7:14 p.m. I remember the time because I watched the clock for a long time before I did it. She didn't answer. Of course she didn't answer. And I should have hung up. I know that now. Every reasonable part of me knew it then. But grief doesn't consult the reasonable parts of you. Grief just opens your mouth and starts talking. "Emilia, it's me. I know you probably won't listen to this, but I don't understand what I did wrong. I've been going back through everything and I keep coming up empty and I need you to tell me because I can't. I still love you. I know that probably makes things worse. I'm sorry. I just need to talk, that's all. I just need to talk to you." 2 minutes and 11 seconds. I know because Victor Price told the court the exact duration before he pressed play. He let it run to the very end. That awful, trailing silence at the end where I was still holding the phone to my ear in that empty kitchen, not quite ready to hang up. The court heard that silence too, every second of it. Then Price turned to the judge with the calm of a man who has done this exact thing in exactly this way many times before and said, "A man who doesn't know what he did wrong, Your Honor. is a man who was never truly present in this marriage. I stood up. My chair scraped the floor too loudly. I said, "That's not what that voicemail." The judge held up a hand, gently but completely. "Mr. Joseph, you'll have the opportunity to respond. Please sit." I sat. My hands went flat on the table. I stared at my folder. And then I did something I can't fully explain. I took out a pen and I wrote 2 words on the inside cover of the folder, and I folded it back over so nobody could see. I don't know why I wrote it. Some part of me that was still connected to something I'd stopped believing in years ago. I pressed my palm over the cover. The fluorescent light above me buzzed once. Just once. Price moved on to the land. I need to tell you about the land, because without it none of this makes sense. My grandfather was a quiet, stubborn man who trusted blood more than banks. Before he died, he placed 3 parcels of land into a trust, hills mostly, some flat land near a creek, and sealed it with conditions written in 1983 language that nobody reads anymore unless they're looking for something. The trust matured the year Amelia and I had our 5th anniversary. I received a letter from a registry office that I didn't understand, put it in my desk drawer, and told myself I'd see a lawyer about it soon. 3 months passed. I didn't see a lawyer. What I didn't know, what I had no reason to know, was that Amelia had already found that letter, had already read it, had already done the math that I hadn't done, had already made a phone call I never knew about, and had already started building something while I was still believing we were fine. Price presented the documents to the court. He used the word concealment 4 times. I counted. I stood to respond. I barely finished 1 sentence. The back door of the courtroom opened. Nobody looked. I looked. I didn't recognize him immediately. That's the honest truth, and it shames me. 11 years changes a man. The boy I remembered, 19, thin-wristed, walking out of our father's hardware store with nothing but a backpack and a jaw set hard against crying, had become someone with a measured stillness that filled a room differently. He was wearing a dark coat. He carried a slim briefcase. He walked down the center aisle like he had been expected. He hadn't been expected by anyone except maybe some stubborn praying part of me that had never fully stopped. He stopped at the gate. He said, "Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption. I'd like to request permission to enter this proceeding as legal counsel for the respondent." The judge looked at him over her glasses. Price turned slowly in his chair. Amelia turned too. For the first time all morning, her composure flickered. Just slightly, just once, like a candle in a draft. My brother walked to my table and set his briefcase down. He looked at me. His eyes were the same. Exactly the same. He said quietly enough that only I heard, "I should have come sooner. I'm sorry." My throat closed completely. Daniel asked for 5 minutes to review the case file. The judge granted 10. During those 10 minutes, Victor Price had his phone under the table. I couldn't see the screen, but I watched his face, and I've replayed the sequence of expressions that crossed it many times since. First, mild professional curiosity, then recognition, then something that wasn't quite fear but was definitely its neighbor. I found out later what he'd searched. Daniel's record was not a secret: a 2019 magazine profile, a 2021 award nomination, and then, the one that mattered, a 2023 case note in which Victor Price, representing a plaintiff in a property dispute, had suffered what the legal commentary called a comprehensive and decisive defeat at the hands of opposing counsel, D. Joseph. They had faced each other before. Daniel had won. Badly. Price set his phone face down on the table. Amelia leaned toward him and whispered something. He didn't answer her. He was staring at his notepad, pen moving, rewriting something. Rewriting his whole morning, I imagine. Amelia looked at my brother for the first time. What crossed her face in that moment was not quite fear, but it was close enough that I finally exhaled. Daniel didn't come out swinging. That was the first thing that surprised me. I had expected... I don't know what I had expected. Fire, maybe. Volume. 11 years of stored grievance arriving in a courtroom like weather. Instead, he stood up quietly and asked permission to question a single witness. A woman named Sandra, Amelia's closest friend, who had testified earlier about my emotional unavailability and Amelia's private suffering. The judge allowed it. Daniel approached Sandra with a smile that was warm enough to be disarming. He said, "Sandra, you testified that Amelia told you, and I'm quoting from your statement. Owen is so distant lately, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Is that correct?" Sandra: "Yes." Daniel: "When did she say that to you?" Sandra paused. A pause just one beat too long. "Around last February, I think." Daniel nodded, opened his briefcase, removed a single printed page and handed it to the clerk. "Your Honor, this is a cell tower record placing Amelia Joseph in Cancun, Mexico, for 7 consecutive days in February of last year. Owen Joseph was home alone, caring for her cat." Sandra's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The hotel receipt was 1 page. Clean, precise. Hotel Azul Paraíso, Cancun, February 9th through the 16th. 2 names on the booking. Amelia said the trip was professional. She said she and Victor Price had known each other for years, family friends, she called them, and that she didn't see the relevance to the proceedings. Daniel said pleasantly, "The relevance, Your Honor, is this." He spoke without raising his voice, without theatrics, without a single wasted word. He explained that Victor Price had previously represented a man named Robert Dales, Amelia's former fiancé, in 2 separate property disputes. Both cases had involved inheritance trusts. Both had involved bloodline clauses, the same legal architecture now present in the Joseph Land Trust. "This isn't a divorce proceeding," Daniel said. "This is a coordinated property acquisition. The legal framework of this case was built by someone who knew exactly what clause to look for and exactly how to work around it. Except they didn't work around it. Because I found it." He sat down. Amelia's hands were on the edge of the table now, pressing down, knuckles going pale. Price stood to object. Daniel looked at him and simply waited. The objection dissolved. "There's a specific memory I need to give you before I tell you about the voicemail Daniel played, because without it, the full weight of what happened won't land the way it should. 3 years into our marriage, a company offered me a regional manager position in another city. Real money. Real future. I came home vibrating with it, laid everything out on the kitchen table, the offer letter, the salary figures, the timeline, and I asked Amelia what she thought. She smiled. She said, 'Whatever you want, babe. I'll follow you anywhere.' 1 week later, she told me she'd been offered a promotion. She cried, genuinely, I thought, and said she didn't want to hold me back. I turned down the job. I never got another offer like it. The promotion never existed. I know that now because Daniel played the voicemail she'd left Price that same night, obtained legally from a former associate of Price's firm. Her voice filled the courtroom. Calm, deliberate, describing a plan to keep me in place until the trust matured. The silence that followed was the heaviest thing I have ever been inside. The judge told the gallery to settle. Amelia did not look at me. The judge departed from procedure. I have thought about this moment many times since, the moment she set her pen down, folded her hands, and looked directly at Amelia, the way adults look at children who are deciding whether to keep lying. She said, "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you directly. Did the promotion you referenced to your husband exist?" Price started to object. "I'm not asking your lawyer." The judge didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I'm asking her." Amelia was quiet for a long time, long enough that the court reporter's fingers stopped moving. Then, there was an opportunity being discussed. "Was there a formal offer? Yes or no?" "It didn't move forward. That is not yes or no." Silence. Amelia looked down at the table, and in that silence, in that long, airless, consequential silence, something shifted in the room that wasn't coming back. I felt it physically, not satisfaction, not victory. Something sadder and heavier than either of those. The particular grief of watching someone you once loved choose, right in front of you, to keep going in the wrong direction. I closed my eyes. 3 seconds. Then I opened them. Price tried to salvage it. I'll give him that. He stood up and argued that regardless of the recording, regardless of the timeline inconsistencies, the marriage had existed, the years had been real, and Amelia's contributions as a spouse remained quantifiable and legally relevant. His voice was still composed, his suit was still pressed, but something underneath both had gone loose, and everyone in the room could feel it. Daniel stood. He didn't match Price's energy. He lowered it, spoke quietly enough that people leaned forward to hear. "Your Honor, I'm not asking this court to punish anyone. I'm asking this court to read page 7 of the original trust document, filed 1983, which contains a bloodline inheritance clause legally prohibiting any transfer of these parcels through marital dissolution. The law is not ambiguous. It was written before this marriage existed, and it will stand after this proceeding ends. My client is not asking for damages. He is asking this court to follow a law that was already written. That is all." He sat down. Price had nothing, because you cannot argue around a 1983 clause that says what it says. You can only hope nobody finds it. Daniel had found it at a rest stop at 2 a.m., driving through the night with a folder in the passenger seat. The judge didn't take long. She reviewed the clause. She reviewed the recording. She reviewed the cell tower record and the hotel receipt and the manufactured timeline of suffering that had been 3 years in the construction. She ruled the land parcels were excluded from marital assets by operation of the bloodline clause. Amelia's claims to the inheritance were dismissed entirely. The divorce could proceed on its remaining terms. She also stated, clearly and for the record, that she was referring the matter of potential perjury, fraud upon the court, and professional misconduct to the appropriate bar authority. She looked at Price when she said it. Price was already gathering his papers. He didn't look at Amelia, didn't say a word to her. He simply collected his things with the brisk efficiency of a man erasing himself from a situation, and he walked out before the judge finished reading. The door swung shut behind him. Amelia sat alone at her table. The gallery was murmuring. Someone behind me said something I didn't catch. Daniel was writing a note. The clerk was stamping documents. I didn't move. I just sat in my father's too-big suit and watched the door Price had walked through and thought about all the mornings I had made her coffee without being asked. We walked out into a gray afternoon, the kind of flat, uninflected light that doesn't do anyone any favors. Behind us, I heard Amelia's heels on the courthouse steps, fast, purposeful, not looking back. A car was waiting. She got in. The door closed. It was gone before I reached the bottom step, and I stood there for a moment watching the space where it had been. Daniel's rental car was in the 3rd row of the lot. We walked to it without talking, stood beside it in the cold. I said, "Dad believed you. He just didn't know how to say it." Daniel went very still. He told me, about a year before he died, he said he found proof the signatures were forged by someone else. He said he was going to call you. Daniel looked out at the parking lot. His jaw moved. "I kept the note he wrote. I've been carrying it for 3 years. I held out a folded piece of paper, old, creased in thirds, the way something gets when it lives in a wallet a long time. Daniel took it. He didn't open it. He just held it in both hands like it had weight. After a long moment, he said, "You should have called me sooner." "Yeah," I said. "You too." We got in the car, and on the inside cover of my folder, the one I'd been clutching since that first impossible hour, were the 2 words I'd written when I heard that back door open and looked up and somehow, across 11 years and every broken thing between us, knew. He came.